Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited for this event. We hope, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Amber Ledbury, the Outreach Coordinator at Climate Action Now. It'll be just a few minutes while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker question in the chat. The icebreaker question is, where are you joining us from today? All right, and you should see that in the chat right now. And we will be recording this event. We do hope that you'll turn on your video so that we can all see each other, but the recorded event will be available publicly online. So if you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out the recording tomorrow. I'm very grateful that everyone is here today because even though the news has been upsetting lately, there is still good news about the climate. People just don't hear enough about it. So thank you for joining us today to get your April monthly dose of climate hope. I'll now turn things over to Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at Climate Action Now.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at Climate Action Now, like Amber said. As you get settled and more people join, just keep that icebreaker answer coming. We love to always hear where people are joining from and what brings you to join us today. So before we transition into the live interview, we have a tradition of starting with an action. So if you've been to any of our recent events, you already know the drill. We'll be using the Can Action Carousel to take action today. This web-based version of the Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to business leaders and political decision makers. It offers an endless stream of actions, measures your personal impact, and lets you earn points towards the planting of real trees. And the best part is that any environmental organization, local chapter of a larger group, or community group that wants to scale up their impact can get a carousel, whether they have their own website or not. So let me share my screen and show you just how easy it is to take action with the carousel. So you should be seeing my screen shortly if you're not already. This is today's action. Tell your state leaders to support giant landscape scale solar farms. As you'll see, it only takes 3 clicks to take an action. First, click Do It Now. Then you can choose how you want to contact the decision maker you're reaching out to. And because I entered my address earlier, it knows who my state, federal, and in some cases local representatives are. You have the option of editing the message with this pop-out menu if you want. And once you have it looking how you like, then you click that send message button. And it's that easy. You've taken action. Earlier, I mentioned earning points towards the planting of a real tree. And so far, the Climate Action Now community has actually planted over 500,000 trees together, which is pretty incredible. So if you want to take action on your computer today, I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now. Just give me just 1 second. All right, and this is the link to today's action. If you prefer to just use your phone or tablet, we have a QR code for you. So just point your camera at it, wait for that pop-up to appear, and tap on it to get to the carousel. Of course, if you've never used the carousel, you'll have to put in some basic information to take action, like your name, address, and email. You'll also be encouraged to set a personalized message. And for those of you who already have app accounts but are using the carousel for the first time, don't worry, you will not have to start from scratch. When you enter your email, you'll be prompted to enter a verification code, and once you do that, it will transfer all of your progress from the app to the carousel. So that's all from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm going to turn my camera into the action slide so you still have access to it. And now I'll hand things back over to Amber to introduce our speakers and get things started. Over to you, Amber.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Today, Sam Matty-Coast, the editor-in-chief at Climate Action Now, will be talking with our expert guest speaker, Premal Shah. Sam authors the Dose of Climate Hope Substack newsletter for Climate Action Now. The Dose of Climate Hope illustrates new technologies, policy solutions, people, and trends that give us reason to be hopeful about the climate. Premal Shah is a social entrepreneur who has spent his career using innovative finance to change lives. He co-founded Kiva, you may have heard of it, the crowdfunding platform that has channeled over $2 billion in loans to low-income entrepreneurs in 150 countries. Now he's applying that same model to climate, co-founding renewables.org, which allows anyone to power clean energy where it's needed most by investing as little as $25 in solar projects across India and Africa. We'll now transition to our live interview as you hear from Premal and Shah please type any questions you'd like to contribute to the discussion into the chat. Over to you, Sam.
All right. Hi. So I'm Sam Matty Coast. I write the Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope for Climate Action Now, and also the weekly Anthropocene as my personal Substack. And I am super excited today to be talking with Premal Shah, who is the CEO and founder of Kiva and now renewables.org. And this is particularly relevant right now because we are in an extraordinary leapfrog moment. There was a great new report from Ember, really a leading think tank chronicling the global clean energy transition, pointing out that a lot of key metrics of renewable energy adoption, from like percentage of electricity generated by renewable energy to percent of total energy consumed in the form of electricity as opposed to fossil fuels, to like EV adoption, to battery sales per capita, to a whole bunch, are now much higher in many developing countries than in developed countries. Countries like Morocco, Kenya, Namibia are much further along on the road to a fully renewable powered economy than places like the United States. And and this is also particularly important because those countries are often where energy is particularly valuable, where it's lifting people up not from sort of TV to two TVs, but to like to someone's first light, first consistent around the clock power to power fridges to keep a cold chain going for vaccines to the impact of electricity is much greater in a place that is in a developing country. So, Premal's model, which is really interesting, is one of the rare options available for people in developed countries like the United States or like the EU or Australia to directly help that global South solar boom. Because a lot of those solar panels are being sourced mostly from China, some from India. It's often taking place in a way that's very hard to influence. But if you care about that and you want to help it go even faster, renewables.org has created a way to do that. So could you tell me what that is, Primo?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And I'm a huge fan of what Climate Action Now is trying to do in the community. I think I started following a few of you last night who are part of this. And look, what we're trying to do is create the lowest cost financial way to address climate change because you can make a 0% interest loan. It's not a donation to help finance the build out of solar, clean energy in markets where the grids are the dirtiest. So global warming is a global problem. We should look at where kind of building solar would have the biggest impact for the buck. And when you look at markets like India, China, really in the global south, one, their grids are dirtier. So, India is still building coal-fired plants. Coal is the number one contributor to CO2 emissions on the planet, and we're still building these coal plants. And as the global south industrializes, as there's the rising middle class and people get richer, there's a lot of wonderful things about that from a poverty alleviation standpoint. But there's also, if they make that same transition that we made in the global north, that is just unsustainable for the planet. And so there's these are very dirty grids, and there's just more and more CO2 kind of piling up. The dollar goes further in these markets than it does, for example, in the US. There's more sunny days in these markets in the global south than a lot of the kind of places where global north solar is being built. And so if we were in a carbon war room right now, saying, hey, where can we put money to work in climate finance? We would pick many countries in the global south where emissions, I read a stat, about 80% of the new emissions this century will come from the global south. And so we really got to help that industrialization process be a clean energy driven one. And that's essential. And there's just not enough capital. And it turns out that when you go and talk to solar developers in these markets, if they could access concessionary loans. So these are loans from people like us lending $25, $100, and we just give up our need for earning a profit on it. But if we would lend money at zero interest and let these solar developers basically construct new solar projects across Africa, across India, over 5 years, they could pay back that loan, that principal, and then you could get that money back into your account at renewables.org and recycle that money and fund other solar projects around the world. So that's the basic model. It's a website that you can put in $25 or more and essentially finance solar around the world and get repaid every month as that solar is built, as that electricity is sold to maybe, a tea plantation in Tamil Nadu, India, or an edible oil factory in Rwanda. There's kind of all these different projects on the renewables.org websites. You can see these different rooftops where you can start basically helping those rooftops shift to clean energy and get repaid over time.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull up some of the shots from our previous text interview with your co-founder Laszlo Feasley. Like this is the tea plantation in Tamil Nadu, India you and your partner's solar developer helped renewables.org help pay for that solarization. This is a regional fish depot in Burkina Faso. Appeals that oil factory you mentioned, a cooking oil refinery in Rwanda. And there's just a range of cool projects on the renewables.org website that are just visible as places that have already benefited from this solar investment platform that your donation will go to future examples like it. And so just building on what you talked about, and as Amber's pointing out, we now have built a partnership with renewables.org for with Climate Action Now with our planet saving subscriptions, in which your donation goes partly to Climate Action Now to keep our writing and our sort of advocacy software alive, and partly to renewables.org. And there's a really natural symbiosis here because our advocacy software currently only works for elected officials in the US. And that sort of makes sense because in the US, the barrier to clean electrification is politics and the ridiculously powerful fossil fuel industry lobby and the ridiculous fact that it is much easier to buy an assault rifle than a solar panel in America right now, and that in many places there's completely unnecessary red tape to put rooftop solar on your own roof. Places like Australia, it's like 10 times cheaper to get rooftop solar, both because they can buy the cheap solar panels from China and because they don't have the tariff walls and because they just have stripped away the red tape that requires you to have like 6 different electrician visits to get a rooftop solar set up. So there, money's not really the difficulty in getting solar in the United States. It's regulations, it's politics, it's opposition from the fossil fueled incumbents. But what Premal's doing with renewables.org is really finding those places in the world where money is the difficulty and also where it's a small amount of money, where a very small, like zero interest loan, just giving money, not even forever, just for a time, just as long as you're not charging interest on it, could make the difference for even a fairly large business or institution to get solar on its roof and decarbonize its operations and help be an island of clean energy resilience and prosperity or not. And that is, of course, increasingly relevant given the truly colossally stupid latest fossil fuel centric crisis that has happened due to a war in the Strait of Hormuz by the madman in the White House. So could you tell me more about how you find these places, about that your partner solar company, your focus on sort of enterprises over household level rooftop, and how sort of places come on renewables.org's radar screen, and how the money gets from the Paulson offering loans to the solar panels on the roof in India or Africa.
Right, right. So when you go to the website and you lend, say, $25, that money goes into a pool called the Renewables Fund. And you and other investors who are making these zero interest loans in $25 increments, it's pooled together. We send that to frontline solar developers in markets where it is very hard for them to access capital because of the perceived risk and cost of working in these markets. So you were showing some photos, Ouagadougou, for example, Burkina Faso in West Africa. It's one of the kind of top 10 most poor countries. It's very hard to get capital flows. Even the banks don't lend like they do here in the United States, for example, certainly to solar projects, because solar projects, these are 10, 15-year projects. It's kind of, whether it's rooftop, like residential or a commercial industrial, or if you're doing utility scale. And you have these markets where it's a chicken and egg problem, where because there's no track record or very little track record of successful payback on solar projects, the local banks in those markets are unwilling to get into the game. And if they don't get into the game and start lending money for solar, for clean energy, then you have a just chicken and egg logjam problem where then these projects don't get built. So then there's no track record. So someone has to go first. And this is where I think, frankly, us in the global north, if you will, kind of those with a little bit of means, we can provide concessionary capital. We're like a snowplow that we're coming in with small amounts of money, helping these solar projects get constructed, showing that they can actually be, the repayments can come back, showing a repayment track record, and then we're snowplowing, like kind of clearing a road for the local banks and other larger institutional pools of commercial capital to say, wow, we can make an investment here in Burkina Faso, in West Africa, and we can actually meet our own investment criteria. We can get our money back and the necessary profit. But until someone goes first, until there's this kind of snowplow of everyday people like us, and kind of call it other sources of climate finance, concessionary climate finance that can come from government institutions, etc. Until that track record is established of commercial investability, all this capital sits on the sidelines. And if that capital doesn't come off the sidelines, these solar projects and clean energy projects do not get built in the global south. And if that continues to happen, we continue to have an industrialization of the global south that will be much more dirty, much more, frankly, this is just not the world we want. We need the clean energy transition to be accelerated immediately, but certainly, to really hit kind of the goals we see as possible. And what's really exciting, here's the bright spot, and this is what I think Climate Action Now also tries to focus on, which is in 2/3 of the planet, solar energy is cheaper than fossil fuel-based energies. And that's increasingly kind of sweeping across the planet, particularly in the global south. And so, we're finding essentially solar developers and projects that hit both a kind of a financial hurdle that we have at renewables.org and an impact hurdle. And in that impact hurdle, it is, hey, if the project is built and a repayment track record is established, could that serve as proof to the local banks in the market that this could be a sector to invest in? And if so, then the value of what we are doing in $25 and $100 chunks can really have this massive catalytic effect of moving capital off the sideline, commercial institutional pools of capital off the sideline into clean energy and financing the clean energy transition in the global south.
Absolutely. And that's really, really important on so many levels. Obviously, there's the emissions piece, but arguably, at least in the short term, more important than that is the really sort of overlooked thing about renewable energy is that it's not just a climate mitigation activity, it's also climate resilience. And
Yes.
as we're learning the hard way just now worldwide, it's more than climate resilience, it's geopolitical resilience, it's hedging your bets. It's like Bill McKibben famously said recently, sunshine comes like 93 million miles to Earth, none of them are through the Strait of Hormuz. Um, like, or, the other classic line, like, I saw this, just an online joke, not my own. Like the classic argument against renewable energies as well. What about when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing? Which is totally bullshit. It's totally bullshit now anyway, because grid scale batteries have just become spectacular. You can displace like sunshine from the middle of the day into the middle of the night. It's already running huge chunks of the grid from California to Australia. Batteries just solve that intermittency problem. But the joke is like, well, you talk about when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. What about when the Strait of Hormuz isn't Hormuzing? Oil doesn't work when the Strait of Hormuz isn't Hormuzing. So all those places, the tea plantation in Tamil Nadu, the cooking oil refinery in Rwanda, the university in Botswana, all the places that renewables.org has highlighted as previous sort of solarization projects. None of them are worried about their solar panels stopping working due to the Iran war. And in the event of like a natural disaster, like when a hurricane hit Jamaica recently, you could really see, like, even on aerial photos and stuff, like the grid was down, hurricane had blown stuff up, but the houses with like solar panels and batteries were little islands of resilience. The old lights were still on. Like you even saw with the winter storms in the US over the last few months, like people with like EV batteries were able to run their house off their EV. There is a huge force multiplier to having um even a few places in a community that are independent of like grid level or globe level sort of fossil fuel power shocks. And that is just a huge impact. So um
Sam,
what
my build on what you're saying. It's one of these things that
yeah.
you know, one can be motivated by, hey, look, this might be the one of the biggest bangs for the buck around, $1 in my wallet going out into the world, helping contribute to carbon avoidance and decarbonization, and then coming back to me. Yes, but there's also a climate justice angle. There's an economic argument around resilience, in these markets. There's a pollution argument. There's just I mean, there's so many reasons. It's like good stacked on top of good, stacked on top of good.
Yeah, like
And
something like a third of deaths worldwide are linked to air pollution, which is a risk factor for cancer and heart disease and tons of stuff. Yeah.
it is one of those things. And when we looked at this, and again, I came from Kiva. Kiva, we raised through crowdfunding millions of people on the internet lending $25 at a time, lending, not donating, zero interest loans, and it's total over $2 billion, as you said, for millions of micro enterprise businesses across the global South. And I think one of the things that was really exciting was little bits of money can kind of, where the perceived risk is high, we can come in and kind of create that track record and unlock capital from kind of local banks and other larger pools of capital that are fearful of investing across Africa, India, etc. I think the same thing is true here, around solar in these markets, and we can create these track records where they don't exist. At the end of dirt roads in West Africa. I mean, Sam, you're going out to, I think, Kenya to visit one of these projects. I'm so excited for you to see this. And ideally, we can actually, create the track record that really allows, 100x times capital plus to come in and really scale up these solutions. And it's good on top of good on top of good, meaning like, it can be financially viable, and it's just a win for all. And I get really excited about it. I get excited about the role that we can play, even with a small amount of money. Um, and it's all hands on deck right now.
So yeah, and I absolutely, and it's a super. I agree with everything you just said, and also I want to zero in on just how sort of it's always tough talking about money because like in the modern world, everyone's bombarded by scams all the time, and it's hard
Yeah.
when you have a legitimate thing to avoid sounding like a scam. Like it's hard, like especially if you're some sort of new business coming out of nowhere. But like let's talk about exactly how this is structured in such a way that it has zero risk for people providing those concessionary loans. Because as I understand it, as I've discussed with your co-founder Lasso in the previous interview we did, like someone on the renewables.org website provides the principal of the loan, could be $5, $25, $50, $100, and you send that plus a whole bunch of other people's loans to a solar developer that pays for them to put solar panels up on a building. Then the developer gets paid back gradually from the people getting the power who run that building. It's just a normal client relationship behind the meter. Then the developer pays you back. Then you give the people back the principal of the loan. And so you're completely avoiding grid level risk. You're not selling to the grid in those countries. So if there's a coup d'etat or something, that's not your problem. You're just in a relationship with the actual building, the business buying that power, not with the whole country. And if someone invests money, they'll be paid, I think it was monthly over 5 years, so they are guaranteed to get all of their money back at the end of 5 years. So this is literally like most like you're not getting interest from like a savings account, but like this is literally this is functionally identical to keeping your money in a piggy bank or something under the bed, and that it will definitely be there in 5 years, except it's also going out around the world and having adventures and helping people get amazing solar power.
Sam, I agree with just about everything you said, but we have to stop short of saying that is as safe as your savings account, which is FDIC insured, government
Yeah,
insured.
okay, about
It
that.
is
Sorry, I didn't mean to
you
exaggerate.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, just to characterize the risk
But you do
accurately.
offer a guarantee.
We're lending, you are lending money. It is a 5-year loan. You
Yeah.
get 60 payments. You get paid back monthly, little chunks at zero interest. So you don't make money on this. This is it's like lending money to a friend. Like you don't try. Well, it's a
But you
not.
don't lose money either.
But yeah, that's the idea. And with Kiva, the internet community has lent out over in these $25 increments over $2 billion, and there's a 96% repayment rate on Kiva. So that's in microfinance. And so you could say of that $2 billion lent, 4% of it has been lost due to defaults on the ground, by these small businesses or catastrophic currency devaluation issues. We've taken a lot of those lessons from Kiva and microfinance, and we're applying it here. And we believe that it should return your principal. We're trying to find people, we kind of solar developers that have the right kind of a financial stewardship, that there's layers of protection against all the things that can go wrong in these markets, including currency devaluation, so on and so forth. There's a lot of risk in these markets, which is again why local banks and big investors don't actually fund in these markets. But we believe that if you can actually provide this concessionary patient capital, meaning zero interest versus you're trying to get a 15% dollar return. If you're trying to go for that, then it eliminates a whole tier of projects that are actually investable at the zero interest level. Does that make sense? And we believe that they're
Yeah.
investable in the sense that that there's a very, very high likelihood, just like Kiva, that 96% repayment rate, there's a very high likelihood that you will get your principal back over 5 years. And in the process of doing so, you can withdraw that money back to your bank account, or you can re-lend that money over and over. And at Kiva, what we saw is people would lend money out, they would get repaid, and then they would turn around and relend over and over and over. And so a big part of that $2 billion that has been raised from the internet community is just people relending that money that they lent in year one. Originally, they've lent it out like, it's watching your same $25 have its life over and over and over in terms of impact all around the world. That's the vision here.
And it works. You're getting paid. Like you can make a one-time donation and then get like every month get part of it back and invest it in a new project, which is just a really cool sort
That's
of almost
exactly right.
gamified way of supporting like like if you just spelled it out like in a World Bank document, like supporting distributed renewable energy in the global south with concessionary zero interest loans, it doesn't exactly grab people's attention. Like, this is my save the world game. Well, every month I can send my money without adding more money to help someone else get solo. Like it's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what we learned from the Kiva experience, and I think this is true here, which is, Sam, you said there's just so many scams out there.
Yeah.
Trust is really in the world of this internet world, it's really hard to know what to trust. There's nothing like getting money back into your renewables.org account or into your, Kiva account, and you see proof that something is working. I lent to, projects in West Africa and it's paying me back. And that is a very powerful way of accountability, of transparency, of trust. And slowly, as people have this experience of actually getting their money back, it kind of it kind of opens your heart, um, and then people start spreading it to their friends and family. I mean, they start saying, hey, look, this seems legit. And so Kiva is now 20 years old. We're 20 years into the Kiva journey, and again, $2 billion raised. But it's like, it's like 3 million plus people have lent on Kiva. at renewables.org, we're at the very beginning of our journey. We only have our first 500 people who've lent money through the website. And there's about a dozen projects, and you can actually see the rooftops, and where the solar panels are. In fact, when you
I'll
log
pull
into
up that screen again.
renewables.org, what's that?
I'll pull up that shared screen again from
Oh,
your
that's
renewable.
great. That's great. When you log in, we have this thing called My Rooftop, and you can kind of see your own rooftop and where your, projects are. So you see on the right scene, that's Botswana, India. You can see these are the different projects essentially that have been financed so far by this small community. It's only about 500 people. This is still very early in our project, but this is why we wanted to do this podcast is start really, now that we've built this, we wanted people to know about it and give it a shot with 25 bucks.
Yeah, and I think it's really exciting. Like, this is something moving that someone just asked, and someone just asked, can this initiative and investment improve an individual credit rating? So that's just a good question from the chat.
Interesting. Well, so the credit rating, when you're a lender, you're actually loaning the money. You're like the bank, so that wouldn't affect your credit rating. And then on the ground, what it does is it as the solar project is built and it starts generating income because the factory in Rwanda is paying for the electricity. If they pay steadily every month, and that solar developer is then returning that money to you all, the people who finance that project, that therein creates that track record that improves the credit worthiness of that solar developer as well as that factory. They can point to these real, cash flow data and say, look, this should be considered. And so the local banks can start looking at that the next time there's another solar project that could be funded. Right now, the banks are by and large too scared to try to finance these, multi-year projects. They're just, it's just, there's not enough track record there. So that's how we improve the credit worthiness, if you will.
So it doesn't affect the credit rating of the person offering the loan on renewables.org, but it does benefit
No,
the credit
yes,
rating of the solar developer and the business in Africa or India that's getting the solar panels, which is great.
correct, correct.
All right, so okay. Oh, hey, we're getting some great more comments in the chat. Someone says I lent to renewables.org several months ago. I did it as a donation through my DAF. Lasso was very helpful in setting this up. It was a great joy to get monthly updates on my investments. I have recommended renewables.org to friends. So thank you, Sue, for sharing that. And Teresa said, thank you. I love renewables, and I'm always excited every month to get my report on my rooftop and see how my panels have performed. So people are loving it. Like it has like it is something that's real, that's tangible, that people can see and feel, and it is a it and it is just in so many ways it feels like it meets the moment. Like I am really excited. And someone the other person said thank you for answering my question about the credit rating. So it really feels like it meets the moment in a lot of ways. And it's also particularly relevant because the US government has been just absolutely destroying its relationship with much of the rest of the world right now. In particular, some of these same countries where you're funding solar, like the US no longer has like ambassadors to most African countries. Like the USAID, this incredible life-saving program, was devastated for no reason at all, just incredibly stupid reasons. And this is a way that Americans can, and others, of course, but talking about Americans because most of our sort of follower base is American, but obviously this applies to anyone who can go to the website, can run their own development aid program, essentially, can do their own personal reach out to help a business in the global south be able to access solar power when they can't before. So there's a really amazing sort of decentralized crowdsourced empowerment there, allowing people to build links that are often hard to build as an individual.
Yeah, Sam, I think I mean this, especially in the last few years, it's been heartbreaking to see what's happening.
Yeah.
We can't rely on a lot of the institutions kind of the trust in our institutions have fallen a lot, and some of the actions are just mind-boggling to me, and heartbreaking to us. And this is a way, it's, for folks who, you don't have to be Bill Gates, you don't have to have a lot of money. We want to create, and Climate Action Now is obviously just doing this so well. I'm so proud of the work you all do.
You.
Um, basically we have to find accessible ways for us to exert our power and be effective together. And drops in the bucket are how buckets get filled. And so each one of
Yeah.
us doing our thing, we're gonna, if anything, maybe, kind of the actions of the last few years will create even more common sense driven willpower to all of us, just, instead of tuning out or kind of withdrawing. I mean, and I think Climate Action Now is really built on this. It's built by people who just believe that small actions in the present moment can really add up. And we got to keep doing it. And this stuff matters. And what we're trying to do, just like you all on renewables.org, you can actually see the projects. We want to create transparency around it. So, you know, um, we can kind of connect with our own ripple effect or butterfly effect, if that makes sense. We want to help you visualize your own butterfly effect, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And this is what we're seeing. This is oh, there's a good new question, but I'll get to that in a sec. This is what we're seeing. Sort of the whole energy world has been shocked over the past couple of years by the case of Pakistan, which is a perfect example of that case of little drops adding up to a bucket. People started noticing just huge amounts of solar panels being imported into Pakistan from China. People started noticing people started noticing solar panels showing up on like satellite images of Pakistani rooftops, but like the Pakistani government wasn't supporting this or promoting this or even aware of this. It was just like ordinary people across Pakistan ordering solar panels online from China and putting them up without any regulation or permitting at all, just on their own initiative, on top of their own homes and businesses. And that has grown to make solar in like 2 years. It's the fastest electrification ever anywhere, has grown to make solar power the largest source of electricity in Pakistan, like more than 20% of all electricity, um, like basically creating a fifth of the nation's entire electricity system, crowdsourced, decentralized. The government wasn't even aware of it in 2 years, which is just incredible. Which is clearly we and it was just another great report from Emble showing that like if you look at how many solar panels most countries are importing versus how much they're installing, most installations appear to be not recorded. Like a lot of countries around the world, even developed countries like Australia, lots of solar panels are going in, but the official registries of how many solar panels are installed aren't at nearly as high as imports. So a lot of people are just doing this on their own initiative. It isn't even showing up in any kind of formal government program or subsidy. A lot of people are just um getting their own solar panel, putting it up, and emancipating themselves from the global fossil fuel stupidity. And this is really something that with renewables.org you can help people do.
Yeah, I've heard this phrase, something like, sometimes you have to ignore the headlines and look at the trend lines. And
Yeah, absolutely. That
and
we really
and
try to do that.
and the headlines, I mean, not ignore the headlines. It's just headline. Some of these headlines are so heartbreaking. At the trend line level, there's such a, like, we like,
It's like,
solar
it was the best of times at
solar
the
makes good
time. Like,
economic
yeah,
sense. It does. We need to continue to scale it. We need to build that business case together, and we need to accelerate its proliferation as fast as we can. It is so obvious. And it's, if we all put our shoulders against the wheel, I think we're going to get it done faster. And there's all sorts of it's a hopeful trend that we can even blow more life into.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and it's increasingly not so much a trend as just like as like the mega trend.
yeah,
Solar has been for years now a majority of all new electricity generating capacity from any source built everywhere in the world, and that
yeah.
and that number just keeps going up. Like even in the U.S., it's a majority. Despite federal attacks, it is such an economic no-brainer at this point. Like Saudi Arabia is installing tons of solar. Everyone in the world is installing tons of solar, and you're making that more accessible to people and giving them an advance in their decarbonization, in their local reduction of air pollution, in their freedom from like the vagaries of geopolitics and fossil fuel markets, helping establish a lot like a credit worthiness that they can use for future investments. Like you said, good piled on top of good. And this is a really good question, just someone put in the chat. How much new funding can you absorb at this time? Do you have projects lined up to take on if significant funding shows up? So I know you'll primarily partner with that solo company. What is their pipeline like? What is your pipeline like?
We
What is the answer to that?
There is there is a very solid pipeline of not only other projects that could be funded if there were sufficient capital coming in through the website, but also other solar developers in other regions have been reaching out to us. And so, we saw this over at Kiva too. Kiva works with about 500 local organizations across the global south. We vet them. For every one that gets into Kiva, there's several that gets rejected because they don't pass certain financial and impact screens. So that's the same process that we'd have here is, hopefully as word spreads about renewables.org and more people try it and more money comes into the system and it starts recycling and compounding and getting bigger, we'll basically be able to work with more and more solar developers and ultimately solar projects and accelerate in the markets where the grids are the dirtiest. Essentially where where it would have the greatest impact.
Absolutely. So yeah, what you're telling me there is not only is your current carefully vetted solo developer partner have tons of businesses queuing up to want some concessionary loans so that they can get solar on their roof, you also have tons more businesses wanting to also become solar developer partners in their own regions to get you even more businesses that can benefit from these concessionary loans.
100%. 100%. What's
All
interesting is
right.
the kind of if you go to the COP or you watch these global conferences, the number one thing, is that the global south will say, "Hey, global north, don't wag your finger at me and tell me to pollute less. You need to provide more climate finance so that we can make our industrialization a clean transition," right? Like, and
Yeah.
it always breaks down at the climate finance, like the amount that the global north is willing to provide the global south. And now we as individuals, instead of the World Bank, we could be like the world's bank, like just
Yeah.
individuals coming in, people powered and being a part of that solution. And the stuff that will happen at these conferences will happen in their own way. I've started to believe that, the political action that we try to do, that's absolutely vital. But when we're not getting through there, we got to find other routes.
Yeah, and this is part of a really big like global evolution in charity and development aid. Like people to people, person to person really outperforms government to government at a lot of levels. And like we see this with places like Give Directly that are giving money
Yeah.
directly to families in the global south instead of instead of sort of funneling it through aid programs so they can decide whether they want to spend it on like plumbing or cattle or an island or a metal roof or whatever because they know best what they need. And we see this with remittances, like money flowing back from immigrant and migrant labels to their home countries, where it often can really transform lives for the communities that they've left from to go work. Um, Increasingly, that is much more efficient. It's much harder to it's much more targeted. It's precisely what people need. It often has a really powerful like trust verifier with by knowing the individual recipients, and it's much harder to corrupt or misuse like many sort of developing countries dictators have misused like government to government aid funding for their own nefarious purposes, and that is not at all really possible here. This is not going through any government. So this is really part of a great revolution. And also, and I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm just trying to network to all the different stuff going on. I just want to give a big shout out to Barbara L in the comments who just said she just invested $100 during this call. And she says it's a no-brainer, very exciting and hopeful. Thanks for all you're doing. So thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, thank you. All right, she's giving us a thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. You rock, whoever you are. Um, and
It's got like telethon vibes here, and well, obviously, look, one of the things that I want to celebrate is we all are just trying to find the best way to channel our own activism and our care for the world. And I One things I get excited about is, groups like Climate Action Now, renewables.org, others, as we get these kind of members together, we all have we should like the beauty of and this is when we're all focused on the issue and the mission, it's not some competitive thing. It's actually like just sharing with abundance. Hey, the 500 people who are using renewables.org, they should know about all the different things that they can do, you know, like the climate action now kind of experience, etc. Like there's so much that we can do about better coordination so that we can improve our climate action basically. I'm just excited to compare notes and figure out how we can get more people to feel their own power and see the impact of what they're doing. I feel like what oftentimes kind of gets people, maybe from not, it keeps people from acting is not feeling your impact. And so it's kind of these feedback loops too. Anyways, we could talk a little bit about more about that. I did have something, Sam, that I wanted to show if I could share my screen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me see here. Let me do this here. This is a presentation. We just got invited actually over at Microsoft to, they have a kind of an employee a group that does worry about climate change. And of course, Microsoft with AI and all that stuff, there's a lot of contributions that they need to think about around clean energy. But we put let me just this is have you ever seen this kind of chart? I thought this is kind of a simple meme because as you put it, Sam, it's kind of complicated to explain just how impactful this thing can be. But hopefully this domino slide helps visually, which is if the small domino is someone putting in 25 bucks into a zero interest loan that helps basically this is the kind of helps fund borrowers in the global south, and then that positive repayment track record is generated, and there's commercial investors, they take notice, and then hundreds of millions of people get access to commercial capital, small businesses around the world. And that's how microfinance has worked since 1975, like the mid 1970s. Okay, here, this is the same idea here, which is zero interest loans in the global south. Get these developers getting this repayment track record. That track record is demonstrated over the next several years, and that crowds in the commercial investors. They take notice. And then all of a sudden, we're able to, at scale, really accelerate clean energy in these markets, which basically, it really makes a dent in our fight for the future. So anyways, I thought this kind of weird domino thing kind of paints a picture, and I did think it would be worth showing.
Yeah, it really is, and it's great. Yeah, and someone else is asking and someone else is asking in the comments like, what are the sort of democracy levels of these countries? And I was just explaining, it varies. Burkina Faso is a military dictatorship right now, but the whole world needs to transition to clean energy as soon as possible. And someone else just asked like about the sort of political affiliation of the solar company, and it's a solar company. Like I believe it's founded by its political affiliation is wants to sell solar panels. These are loans to sort of business entities that are not really part of a political program, that are just ways for people who care about solar power to help people who want to buy it faster.
That's right. And now, but it raises, these are the concerns, the same concerns that commercial investors all over the world have too, which is, oh wow, there's political risk in Burkina Faso or in West Africa or in India, or there's all these risks around it, these markets, contract law, uh, solar panels getting stolen off of roofs. I mean, like there's unknown unknowns, right? And so again, we have this chicken and egg problem with which is if you just are so scared of all the possible things that can go wrong, obviously these large investors are not going to invest in solar in these different pockets in these really high CO2 markets, high CO2 growth markets. Someone needs to go first and break that, like prove. And we think that there are actually good solar developers in pockets in that are doing good underwriting of the off takers and who can buy the electricity. Right now we're selling it commercial, industrial, like they're actually looking at the small businesses. You can see kind of on this slide right here, car dealerships, universities, industrial plants, cooking oil refineries, a regional fish depot. Like these are kind of just, businesses that, are part of that local economy that are right now relying on fossil fuel. We're trying to get them to switch over to solar. And then ideally create a track record that this is investable and then really scale that up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is great. And someone else just asked in the comments, where is the data showing that loans are not going to politicians in charge? If you're indirectly investing in countries like Burkina Faso where bad people are in charge.
Oh,
So
that's a great
yeah,
question. Yeah,
yeah,
we got this at Kiva too. So this is why I think the loan model versus the donation model is so powerful. On renewables.org, just like on kiva.org, and you can see this screenshot if you're looking at your screen. This is my rooftop. This is like my actual investments on the website. So you can see that I've put in kind of about $1,000 into the website. So far, I've been repaid $268. Can you see that? This
yeah.
is real money that is coming back. So if this were going in the form of bribes to government officials, then how would they be paying me back? So the proof that this is working as advertised is you getting repaid. And we saw this at Kiva. This is why we raised $2 billion for in the global south, because we realized people have all of these questions and for good reason, skepticism around corruption and all the things that can go wrong in really anywhere, but particularly you see it in the global south. But you can't write off entire countries. We have to say, no, there's actually like real bright spots and things that deserve investment. And that takes a lot of work and hard work. And that's what we want to do on behalf of the internet community and then feature these projects and allow you to see what we see.
And that
Um,
is in fact why this money is so impactful. Why this project's going begging for like $50 or $100 to get started because most people won't invest in them because they're concerned about like the political risk, like you said. And that is why this can be so impactful because you're willing to support these people who live in these hard to invest places that often have bad governments in power and they just want a chance to be able to buy some solar panels and put them up on their own roof.
I'm really excited. The data we've seen, we've had no late payments, no defaults so far. I really continue to believe that this is just something that has been overlooked for a variety of reasons, but none of which are really fundamentally good ones. If you can go and find good solar developers picking good solar projects in these global south markets where the grids are very dirty and CO, they're continuing to build coal plants and I think we can I think this will be just like Kiva has shown something where people start believing in new possibilities. But obviously the track record, time will tell and I think so far so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And as we are coming to the top of the hour, Premal, I just want to give you the chance to say, what would you like to share that we haven't covered yet? What question have I not asked that I should have asked in like the final minutes? What do you want to share that we haven't already covered?
Um, I would just say I'm really, I feel almost like I'm going to start crying. I think it's really wonderful to be in community with other people who care so much. It's it's very easy to tune out, especially with something like global warming and climate change. Like you could, no one, like you only do it because your conscience. It's such a brave thing. It's the best part of being human is our altruism or generosity, our ability to think beyond ourselves. to think intergenerationally. All progress depends on a larger sense of us and a smaller sense of them. And I think that's what, I feel like we share something here. And I feel honored to be a part of the community.
Thank you. And we are honored to have you here and honored by the attention and caring of everyone else on this call who's listening to this. Thank you all so much. I am incredibly lucky that this is my job and I get to hang out with people like all of y'all.
All right. Thank you so much for today's conversation, Premal and Sam. It's really inspiring, I think, for everyone to have such clear ways to take action and make a huge impact. So, for everyone on the call still, if today's conversation inspired you, here's a great way to take action right now. You can consider becoming a planet saving subscriber with Climate Action Now. So, starting at just $9.95 a month, a portion of every subscription goes directly to renewables.org, Premal's organization, to finance solar projects across the global south. It's a direct, tangible way to support exactly the work you just described. You'll also be planting trees and protecting the Amazon rainforest every single month. We put the link in the chat for you. I'm also going to invite you all to join us for our next monthly Dose of Climate Hope event, because there are so many more stories like this one to be told. Additionally, I'm inviting you to join us for a Talking Climate in the Age of Disinformation action party. That's going to be on May 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to be a great conversation between some of the world's top climate communicators, Catherine Hayhoe, Bernadette Woods-Plackey, and moderated by Jessica Craven. So that brings us to the end of our event. Thank you again to Premal and Sam for sharing your time and insights with us. It was a really inspiring conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. That brings us to the end of our event. To everyone on the planning team, you're welcome to join the debrief and the breakout room named panel. I hope you have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Live long and prosper.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right. All right. I think folks are moving to the breakout room.